In this video I'm going to show you my workflow for scanning 4x5 negatives on the Epson V800 scanner using the wet mounting station. When you buy the Epson from new, it comes with this 4x5 film holder. It's very flimsy, and I find that scanning with the mounting station to be a lot better, especially for 4x5 negatives. You do seem to get sharper negatives. So if you were buying the V800 and you want to do 4x5 negatives, I wouldn't use this. I'd try and get hold of one of these. You can pick them up quite cheaply from time to time on eBay. So that will be my recommendation. This is the film holder, the wet mount holder, and this is the scanning area guide. This has lines marked out on the guide, and that's used for when you place the holder onto the area guide. Then you can align your negative up to make sure that it's dead straight for scanning. If it's not, it's going to go a little bit cockeyed on the scan. The glass plate on this doesn't come with the wet mounting station. I bought this. It's anti-Newton glass, and you do really need this, because if you just buy the wet mounting station without the glass, there's only two ways you can really mount it on this holder, and that's by wet scanning or by taping the negative. And tapings are very awkward to do, and I found the best solution was to use a piece of glass, and once that's closed it holds the negative very, very flat. The negative I'm going to scan today is a 4x5. This is a 4x5 negative, and as you can see, it's got notches at the top right hand corner, and you're always to make sure that they're as you're looking at the top right hand side when you're putting into a holder vertically, or if you're putting it in a film holder, make sure the notches are at the bottom left hand corner. I'll show you using a holder. This is a Fidelity Elite. It's a 4x5 film holder. It holds 2 sheets of 4x5 film, and to load the film you pull the dark slide up. This has to be done in complete darkness, and then making sure that the notches at the bottom left, place the negative into the holder, close the flap, then shut the lid. For developing the negatives, I use the Stearman Press SP445 developing tank. This tank is very economical in the amount of chemicals that's needed to cover the negatives. It only uses, I use 500 mils of solution, so it's very economical, and it comes with 2 film holders in the tank, and each one takes 2 negatives. And to load the negative into the holder, we'd have to take it out of the dark slide first, again in complete darkness. So let's assume, as I say, that's been exposed. We'd carefully pull the negative out, holding it at the edges, and then with the notch at the top right hand corner, we'll then place it into the holder like that. Because it's the notch is at the top right, we know the emulsion's facing outwards, and then place it into the tank like that, and then put the lid on. And once the lid's on and tight on, everything else can be done in daylight. So now we'll look at where I develop my negatives. This is where I develop my negatives. I have a Nova tempering unit. I set the temperature to the required one that I need to develop the film, and once it reaches that temperature, then I can go ahead and develop the negative. I'll give you the details in the video later on of how I developed this negative, or the one that I'm going to scan, which was a 4x5 pinhole photograph. Now let's assume that this negative's been developed and washed. I would take the negative out, as I say, assume it's wet, and then I would hang it up on my £1.50 Wilko drying rack. So we'll get hold of the negative, push it up slightly at the corner, and then on one of the clips where the notches are, just slightly onto the negative, and then just pull it off slowly and allow that negative to dry. Once that's negative's dried, we can then mount it on the wet mounting station and then put it in the scanner, and we'll go to that part now. In this part of the video I'm going to show you how to mount a negative onto the wet mount holder. Just out of interest, it's called a wet mount holder because that's what it was originally designed for. You mount the negatives wet onto that holder, and that means that you're keeping the wet process away from the scanner. You don't want any scanner fluid getting into the scanner itself. And the way that works is you would use scanning fluid. You pour scanning fluid carefully onto the mounting station, and then get the negative, again emulsion side down, place that onto the scanning fluid, align it up carefully. You probably have to put some little bits of tape so it doesn't move about in each corner, and then once the negative's on, you pour more fluid on top of the negative, and then lay on top of that some optical clear mylar, that's like clear optical plastic, and then get all the air bubbles out, and then you can move that over to the scanner. All the wet work's done away from the scanner. But I've used a wet scanning, and I've not seen a big advantage for the cost involved of buying the mylar and the scanning fluid and the time that it takes. I don't think it's actually, for me, it's worth it. I find the dry scanning method to be just as good. But anyway, I just thought I'd tell you that. So to mount the negative, first of all, we'll give it a good blow and remove as much dust as we possibly can. You'll never remove 100% of the dust, but fortunately with the hybrid way of scanning and fetching the actual scanning to Photoshop, we can remove dust particles quite easily. I always put the negatives into archival sleeves and mark some information on the negatives, where I took the picture, what camera I used, the type of film, exposure time, development times. It's always good to have a reference to refer back to. So we take the negative out and then also give that a good dusting, and then place the negative onto the glass, emulsion side down again, because the notches to the top right, that means that this is the emulsion side, and we'll place the negative onto the glass and align it up with the scanning area lines. Get them exactly right, because if you don't get it straight, it won't scan straight. And then I'll pull the glass down very slowly. I don't want the rush of air as I close it to twist the negative. And once that glass is on top of the negative, it's held dead flat and it can't move. And then the final thing, I cut this out of some black mylar. It's slightly bigger than a 4x5 negative, and I place it just around the edges of the negative, and that's just to stop light scatter from the scanner. And once that's ready, the whole thing can be lifted off as one unit and placed into the scanner, which I'm going to show you next. This is a Epson V800 scanner. I'll just switch it on, and then we can lift the lid up, and then again get in the rocket blower, just give it a good dust over, make sure we can get rid of as many particles dust as possible. And then when that's done, we get the wet mount holder and we place it into the scanner, making sure that the thin strip of glass at the back, goes to the back of the scanner. And just place that into the scanner, shut the lid, and now we can go on and scan that negative. So the negative is in the wet scanning holder in the Epson V800, and now I'm going to scan the negative. Just to let you look at some of the settings, how I scan my negatives as raw files. That means no editing at all is done in ViewScan. We just want to do all the editing in say Photoshop. So these are the settings. You can see these. I've got the DPI and the scan resolution set quite low for this video, otherwise it will take quite a long time to scan. I normally scan around 3200 DPI. So that's the input tab. There's nothing below there that you need to see really. The crop tab is basically set to default. Filter, there's none. Colour, this is all set to default. The output colour space should be at grey, and monitor colour space sRGB. And the output, we want raw file ticked, auto file name if you need that, scan size, magnification 100%, and that needs to be set to raw file type to 16-bit grey, raw output with scan. There's nothing really in the preferences. We don't even need a histogram to scan in raw, so I'm going to preview the negative now, so press preview. Right, just checking with the these marching ants to select the area that I want to scan. That looks about right. So now I'm just going to scan the negative. So that's the raw scan. Just to let you know, I took this with my 0.45 pinhole camera. Had it set at the 75mm setting, that's two sections together on that camera, and you can see how the depth of field on these cameras is quite infinite. There's nothing really out of focus back to front, although pinhole images aren't that inherently sharp to start with. The camera was mounted on a tripod, and it was placed, it would have been probably from that first stepping stone about one foot away from that stepping stone, so you can see how wide an angle of view that the pinhole camera can capture. So I'm going to now go to put that file into a Photoshop. It's saying that we don't have an embedded grayscale profile, so I'm going to assign a 2.2 gamma grey profile, and then tick the box and then convert to the working grey. So I'll click OK. Now the image is the wrong way round, so I'm going to flip the canvas horizontally, so this is the correct way. This is how the image was orientated when I first saw it. Then I'm going to go into filter, colour perfect, and looking at the clipping points on the whites and the blacks. The whites are clipping slightly, 0.36, and the blacks a clipping at 4.12, so I need to make an adjustment with that. You'll see at the bottom we've got some paper grades. I don't use them. I rely on Photoshop to build my contrast, so I just use it as a grade 00. It's like a very soft paper if we were talking in darkroom terms. So I'm going to pull the slider down to bring the whites back, bring it down to 0, and then the blacks I'm going to open them up by clicking on the BP tail and pulling that down and getting that as low as I possibly can, and that's gone to 0.02, which is okay as that. Now I know the image looks really dark at the moment, the way that I've altered these sliders, but let's take the whites for instance. If I hadn't pulled the and there's not a lot of whites in this picture because it was taken at sunset, but there's a white area in the sun and one in the water. If I didn't pull this white slider down to get that clipping point to 0, that would appear just as a white blotch, and if I printed this picture it would just be a white, you'd just see the paper itself with no detail on it. So by bringing the slider down, I've got the detail in the actual sun area and on the water. And then with the blacks, again, if I hadn't pulled the or opened the blacks in Colour Perfect, although you can't see anything here, but there is detail, and you'll see when I edit the picture. If I hadn't pulled that down and opened them as much as I could have done, this area would have just gone completely black with no detail. So I've adjusted that, and I'm going to open it into Photoshop. And the first thing we can see, and it's not the pinhole camera because they don't really distort, it's me. I've got the horizon of the water sloping downwards, which is not correct, and that's probably because I didn't get the pinhole camera dead level, so I'm going to have to fix that before I carry on editing. So I'm going to select all the image and show you a little trick to fix this. So then I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and then go to Rotate, and I'm going to rotate the image to get that area level. I can use the ruler tool just to see how I'm going with that. Wants to go just a touch more, and that's about right. So I can click OK to that, and then deselect the marching ants. Now if I had to crop within the boundaries of these white areas, I'm going to lose quite a bit of my composition, so I want to retain the whole composition, and to do that I'm going to use content aware. So I'm going to get the selection tool and pull the selection so it gets all of that white area, and then do the same on the other 3 areas. Now that these selections are made, I'm going to make content aware, get rid of all this white area. So to do that I'm going to press Shift, Backspace and Enter. You have to do that in one sort of sequence, but I'm going to do it this way just to show you. I'm pressing Shift, Backspace, and we have to make sure that content aware is selected in that box. So I'll do it now. So it's Shift, Enter, Backspace, and then content aware will run, and it'll get rid of those white areas, and I'll be able to keep my composition without having to crop it. And if by magic all the white areas have gone and you can't tell I've used content aware, and it's enabled me, as I say, to keep the original composition. There's just a white speck there. I can do it again just to get rid of that. I'll use that tool for it, just the free selection again, and it's gone. So now that I've done that, I've got it straight, I've got my original composition, go to image and convert it to RGB so I can access the Nick Collection and Viveza too. This is what I use to increase the contrast. I like this this Viveza because I can control the contrast and the brightness at the same time. So the areas that I've got to pay particular attention to are the dark areas at the bottom of the picture and these bright areas. So I'm going to increase the contrast and then increase the brightness, and we'll do this in small increments so we don't overdo it. I'm going to press brush on that because it'll create a mask for me. And I'm going to paint in that contrast. I'll probably use a soft brush for this, 100% opacity and flow, and then just paint that contrast in. I'm going to paint it in all over. As I said, the areas that I need to keep an eye on is these bright areas and this dark area at the bottom right of the picture. So we'll just zoom into that, and I'm keeping detail there, so that's fine. I'll leave that as it is with that contrast, but the sun and the white patch in the water, I'm going to paint the contrast out on those areas. So change the brush to black, smaller brush, and then just paint that white area so I'm not blowing those whites. Maybe just that bit there. Right, I'm going to now layer flatten the image and then go back into Nick, the Viveza, and keep working on the contrast. Pull the contrast up and pull the brightness up. And then press brush and paint that contrast in selectively. So again, I'm going to paint the contrast in. I'll paint that all in, and then I can paint it back out when I want to do. I'll go to a slightly harder brush when I get near to the sky area, so I'm not going to create halos. Use the backslash key to get the red mask to see where I'm going. And then you see a slight white area above the houses there. I can just go in with the hard brush and just paint them out. But you don't have to be too accurate with this. It's just blending the contrast. Get rid of the red mask and then go to black, and then, as I say, be aware of the Control Z. Not too much there. That central area, just painting that. So don't go too bright. Probably use a softer brush. And then we can flatten the image again, and then go back into Viveza. As I say, I build the contrast slowly. Nick Collection Viveza. and then increase the contrast more. When I was taking this picture, it was very, very bright. It's a real testament to film that you can capture all this dynamic range with one shot. You're not having to take multiple shots and blend them. I press brush again. I need to make sure when I'm editing that the histogram is not clipping at either end, which it's not doing. So that's good. And then painting that contrast again selectively. I'll go back into the mix software again, into Viveza, it might be called Viveza, I'm not sure, and then increase the contrast more. I want to get the brilliance that I saw when I was there. That's looking more like it. And then press brush. And again, without repeating myself, but painting the contrast again. Go to a slightly harder brush. Just paint that all in and just paint it back with a softer brush this time. You can see I'm using the brush opacity quite a lot to control where the contrast is falling. And then again, you can layer flatten that image. And this time I'm going to go into camera raw. So I'm going to duplicate the image, I'm going to filter, camera raw, and I'm going to use the gradient tool and pull that, bring that sky down, because you can see there was detail. It was a long exposure, but there was detail. Might just bring that down and increase the white slightly. Press OK. That's looking nice and balanced now, and I think I'll go one more time into the contrast control, Viveza, and then just pump up that contrast a little bit more. Press brush, apply, and then paint in the contrast again. As I say, when I was here it was very, very bright, so I'm trying to put that into the edit. Might just change the brush to black and take that bit out there. And then I'll flatten the image again. As you can see at the bottom, there's a slight black area. That could be to do with the developing, or it could be to do with the pinhole. I'm not sure, but that wouldn't look very good on a print. So to get rid of that, I'll probably try content aware again on there. So if I pull a loose selection around it and then shift, backspace, enter, and that's got rid of that. Well, it's just a little bit there. I'll do it a little bit more. Sometimes you have to do it 2 or 3 times to get it right with content aware. That's done it. That's got rid of it. Maybe just a touch there. One more go. That's basically got rid of it. I could fine tune it with the clone stamp tool. Just see what happens with this. I'll duplicate the layer because I can control the opacity then. So we've gone from that to that. That's probably good enough. That looked fine on the print, so I can lay flat on that one. And then finally, probably go back into Camera Raw, filter, and I'm just going to add a slight vignette to the corners of the image. So I do that by going to lens correction and use the vignette tool. So I'm just going to darken the corner. Don't want to go too much, just a little bit. Press P to see the change. That's about enough. So I can press OK to that. And the final thing to do on this image will be to do some retouching work. So we can zoom into the image. You can see I've got some bits. As I say, it's impossible to get rid of the bits when you're using scanning. Putting the negative onto the glass, then into the scanner, you're bound to get dust with it, so it's usually easy to get rid of in Photoshop. So you could use the spot healing tool. It doesn't take that long. I find it quite therapeutic to do this. It makes such a big difference. You could use that, or you could use the clone stamp tool. Just sample somewhere at the side, press Alt, and then just go around with that. That there. Alter the angle of it. And then for this line, probably wouldn't use I'd use the patch tool. So we just draw a line around, scratch, pull the negative, pull the selection to the side, let go, and the scratch is gone. And then we carry on retouching until we've got the actual picture cleaned up. Some more little marks at the top. I won't bore you with this, but this is how I retouch. Little white speck there, and that's about it. So if we look now, we can see that we've got shadow detail in the deepest shadows, and it was deep there. There was virtually no sunlight, just reflected light hitting that area. The water retains detail. You can still see the grain. So there's nothing blown on that. There's a bit of spotting to do on the water. And just to check that, if we go to levels, clicking on the black point, press Alt, we can see we've no block blacks, none whatsoever. And then we go to the white point, we've got slight blowing in that area, but it really is to be expected. It's the bright sun, and these are probably specular highlights. But again, we can fix that so that the blacks are fine and all the highlights apart from those two areas. And I would, if I was going to print this, I want to get rid of these because they will show. So again, I'm going to use the clone stamp tool just to clean that area up. bring the opacity down a little bit. There we go, nearly got rid of those. So that's it, that's the finished image. Let's arrange tilt vertical so you can see. So we've gone from the picture on the left, which is the straight raw scan, to the picture on the right, which is the finished picture, and you can see there's a big difference. And I've only used contrast to edit this picture. I didn't need to use anything else, and it's retained all the detail from the scan. And this was the actual scan file. So scan file on the left from Colour Perfect, and then after editing in Photoshop. Right, that's the end of the video. I'm sure you're glad to hear that. It's been a rather long video, but I've shown you my process from start to finish, how I scan a 4x5 negative on the Epson flatbed scanner, bring it into Photoshop, and how I edit that scan using my contrast grading method. If you have any questions, please leave a message below and I'll get back to you. And once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.